So this is our revision mind map for power and politics. Okay, so power, two types. Sometimes power is the ability to get people to do things they do not want to do. You use force, you use coercion, you use the threat of violence. Do this or I'll hurt you, do this or I'll arrest you. That's one type of power. It's the normal one people think of, but in fact it's not very effective. Philosophically, it's not very effective because as soon as you stop making people do something, they stop doing it. As soon as you lose the power to stop them, they stop following your instructions. A much more efficacious form of power is getting people to want to do the things you want them to do. Get it? Brainwashing. So culture is power. You make ideas seem normal and natural, i.e. respect for private property. If people think the way you want them to think, you haven't got to force them. And you make them think that way by controlling the culture. You tell them something is the case often enough, they think it is. They think it's normal and natural. So very, very rich people don't need armed guards to guard their house 24/7 because we have respect for private property. That's their house, that's their cars. We can't have them. That's an idea. That's power. Moving on. Politics in Britain. We have a democracy where the people vote, people choose the government. We don't have a pure one though, we have a representative democracy. We pick our representatives, we call them MPs. Britain is divided into 650 constituencies. Each constituency picks one representative, we call them an MP, and they go and sit in Parliament and vote on things. So Gavin Barwell is the MP, the representative for Croydon Central. Yeah. We have political parties. You don't vote for individual people, you vote for parties, Labour, Conservative. And the system's called first past the post. If you have more than half the MPs, which is 326 at the moment, then you're in charge. The party with more than half the votes, runs the country. And then they become the government and they select the Prime Minister. So David Cameron is the leader of the Conservative Party because the Conservative Party have the most MPs. How do parties work? Well, they have policies in their manifesto. They say, if you vote for us, we will do these things, schools, hospitals, defence, airports, railways. We have all these big plans. So you choose which political party you think has the best plans. That's how it's meant to work. We also have linked to that, there are pressure groups or interest groups or new social movements. They're involved in one issue. So you have inside groups like the AA. They try and pressurise the government to do things to help drivers. They do that by being friendly with them, giving them good advice. We have outside groups like Greenpeace. They're involved in the environment. They have big protests, etc., to try and convince the government to do what they want. But they only care about one thing, their single issue. Now, all this only works if the people can hear what all sides have to say, a free media, and are educated enough to understand it. If people are stupid, ignorant, democracy can't work. You know why, I hope. So, what are the parties and what do they believe in? Obviously there's more than two, but let's just take two to make it simple. Labour, Conservative, tax. Labour say more tax to pay for better services like schools, healthcare. Conservatives, less tax, less public services, self-reliance, and the state should do as little as possible. So the middle class tend to vote Conservative, the working class tend to vote Labour. Because both sides, these are the sides that will give them what they want. They have money, and they'll take less of it away. They don't have money, so they need services, and Labour will give them more. And they'll take the money from them. That's called class alignment. Linked to that, though, in the last 30 years has been class de-alignment. Middle class people sometimes voting Labour, working class voting Conservative. It's called class de-alignment. And there are other slight patterns, they're not that big deal anymore. Ethnic groups tend to vote Labour because they think they'll help them, and also a lot of them suspect the Conservatives are racists. Gender, slightly more men than women tend to vote Labour. risk takers, playing it safe. Age, older people tend to be Conservative, younger Labour. Labour say they'll change things, the young like change. Older people are afraid of change because they have something to lose, mortgages, etc. We have the idea of not voting. Plenty of people can vote and choose not to. And because they're not registered to vote, because they don't want to pay tax. They have apathy. They're not bothered to vote. Oh, nothing ever changes. There's no point. It's called apathy. Some people simply don't understand the system. They're confused by it. They're a bit intimidated by it. All those words they've got to write down and understand these things. And some people don't vote because where they live is what's called a safe seat. There are certain parts of the country where one party always wins by a mile. Therefore, some people don't bother voting because they know who's going to win beforehand. It's a safe seat. And finally, could be a lack of political socialisation. If in your family you weren't socialised into thinking voting is important, perhaps you won't think it's important. If you weren't taken along to the polling station on election day when you were a kid, your political socialisation is lacking. Then when you're an adult, you still don't think it's important. Moving on. You have non-political power. Remember? Everywhere, at all times, has a power structure. Not just Parliament, Westminster, David Cameron, Ed Miliband, blah, 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 town halls. Everywhere, all the time, power exists. So in the home, it's usually the father. And feminists criticise this, saying it's part of a patriarchal system to keep men in charge. Why does dad normally have the power? Money. Remember? Go back in the book if you're unsure about this. The street, the community. This community is meant to police itself, police as a verb. If they don't, then often youths grab power and the government brings in ASBOs. Now an ASBO is just doing what a parent's meant to do. When the community fails, the government has to bring in ASBOs to replace them. If the community is involved in its own life, you rarely need ASBOs. But somebody will have power on the street. Somebody will have power at home. Somebody will have power in the community. Schools, obviously teachers are in charge, head teacher, etc. Which we say, well, that's part of the hidden curriculum. You're being taught how life is. Somebody else is in charge. Somebody else will tell you what to do. It's a pyramid structure. And finally, work. At work, your boss tends to have most of the power. The workers might get together, form a union to get some power back, and the boss will threaten them with globalisation. Yeah, I'll pay you, if you want more pay, I'll close the factory down, send it to China. And this fact that the boss has all the power over your pay, over your hours, over the work you do, can lead to alienation. You hate your job because you have no control over it. Social reform. Arguments about how to change society. Social reform is changing things for the better. Reform, making things better. So if you remember, we had the idea of the welfare state in 1945. NHS, for education, benefits, employment, try and make people safe and have a decent life from cradle to grave. And that was the consensus for a long time. Everybody agreed with that. That was broken in the 1979, early 80s by the Conservatives. And their neoliberal ideas became the new consensus. Smaller state, lower tax, less help for people. People agreed with that, broadly speaking. In 1997, New Labour won, and a new consensus came in. It sort of mixed these two together. It didn't say either was right or either was wrong. It tried to mix them in some way. Not massively successfully, we now know, after 2008. And finally, in 2010, Conservatives and Lib Dems won the election. The big society is meant to be the new idea. But exactly what the consensus is now, no one quite knows. That's the big puzzle. What's going to happen next? No one quite knows. And finally, we need to look at the social background of MPs. MPs are mostly middle class. Many went to private schools and they nearly all went to university. This is potentially a problem. MPs are meant to represent everybody, and instead They seem to come from one small part of the class pyramid, the middle class. It's an idea this could be represented middle class hegemony. So even Labour MPs, who are meant to represent the working class, are still mostly middle class. Yeah? And we use the example of Gavin Barwell, who's your MP. We use the example that because of his middle class background, it's difficult for him to be able to be a good representative. Empathy is what he may lack.